Today we've got a great sequence here from the Sprint Project. It's 6 exercises scientifically shown to make you faster. Kind of thought it was pretty compelling. We've got a lot of different topics, but, I feel like there's a little bit of something where we can help younger kids know how to modify some of these exercises so they can be doing them.
When you're looking for a speed training program, this is 6 really good exercises. But I also think that in the 8 to 12 range, we're going to need to modify that a little bit.
Right. These younger kids, sometimes I feel like everyone gives them a little too much credit. You get all these videos on YouTube giving you these huge, tough compound movements, and young kids can't quite do them. So let's get into it. Let's go through them, and let's check it out.
All right, let's go.
First exercise here, he's got the jump squats. Pretty basic movement for young kids. They're going to be able to do this, but what do they got? An 8 weeks of jump squat study that they shot up here that really helped guys run a lot faster.
I love jump squats. Now, with the younger group, we would probably modify and not use the weights, either body weight or some sort of resisted jump squat, but what a great exercise.
Yeah, you can do that with like a stretch cord of some kind if you attach them on a belt, if you've got groups. Attach it low on the ground, stand on the belt, and have them jump straight up. That's kind of a good way to get the weights out of some of these kids' hands, too.
Yeah, when they're leaving the ground, we want them to develop that explosive movement.
Yeah, do you find that you like plate stuff better, or do you always use resistance bands for some of the jump squat stuff?
I'm going to use resistance bands because I'm looking for the explosion, the weights. I'm not sold on it, although I think at this level that's fine. But the younger kids, I'm going some kind of body weight or resistance.
A little easier when you're at the park too. When you're at the park, it's hard to have a lot of weights for a lot of these kids. But overall, it's a pretty good study that he cited. I read through it, and there's not much to argue. It's consistent work, trying to get explosive movements. And let's be honest, most of the time, if these young kids just actually practice being explosive, it's going to help them a long ways down the road going through things, trying to be more explosive. That's going to be pretty much a majority of it, practicing movements.
Oh, yeah. Get them out there and get moving, make them explosive. And, yeah, I think this is a great program. These are 6 good exercises.
As we move through, he talks a little bit about the weights that they're using, whether it be 30% or 80% of your 1 rep max. Sometimes that's, again, in this specific exercise, I'm not real sure that you'd accurately be able to do that. What are you going to grab a plate and hold it off to your side and do a jump squat? You would never know your 1 rep max. I mean, who honestly would be able to test that efficiently and not get hurt?
Yeah, and I'm looking for speed, so I want you to move more rapidly. The more weight you've got, you're not going to be able to explode as high. Your fatigue is going to hit faster.
Yeah, later on in the video, he discusses a single leg movement, and there were 6 studies, and 4 of them showed that the more explosive you were, the more results you were getting towards the speed world. And I think you're going to see that a lot of times. And these young kids, I feel like ego becomes more and more of a thing, right? You got to fight off that I don't lift as much weight as the other guy and work on form and the explosive movements. I mean, we're really just here to help out little kids, teach them how to do sports in a more efficient manner so that they can, progress and get into high school athletics and maybe even college if they're good enough.
Well, we're looking at our goals. If our goals here is to work on speed, then we need to work fast.
Right. Explosive movements, drop the weight down in just a little bit. And this portion here, we've got hip flexor training. He quotes a couple different studies, and I tell you, that's some of the stuff that we found in Kbands to be the most effective thing. As soon as you get these little kids to start building their hip flexor strength and get separation as they stride, that wall drill or even these exercises that he's showing in the video, it's the separation. Do you have strength in your glutes to separate and then have a powerful front side, a high knee, good hip flexors? I mean, how many young kids have we trained where you watch them walk around like ducks because they don't lift their knees? You know what I mean?
They just haven't learned to do that yet. And I'm probably more of a mobile fan. I want to keep you moving. So I would take this system and modify it to the Kbands so I can keep you maybe in a 10-yard sprint or, just keep your legs moving.
Right. Well, with Kbands too, these exercises are okay if you're in a weight room setting. But if you strap on Kbands, you can do these out at the field. And some of that stuff's going to be a little bit better for dads and their kids. If you get out to like just a normal park, you're going to be able to do these exercises without needing to strap a band to something. You put it on a fence, that thing could get cut, and then you're getting whacked. Or you put it around some post that's not sitting in just perfect. it's not going to be as easy. But utilize Kbands, grab the right amount of resistance, and you can mimic a lot of these type of exercises. He's got 3 sets of 10, 75% of 1 rep max. And again, well, 1 rep max. How are you measuring a true 1 rep max in this fashion? I can't imagine you'd be able to do that very efficiently. But check out that start right there. Let's back it up just a smidge. I mean, this guy here is about as perfect as it gets on his takeoffs. You get big separation, driving through with your glutes on the back half, a lot of hip flexor, bringing your knee up and being explosive right out of the blocks. I mean, that in essence is sprint speed for youth athletics.
Oh, yeah, that's at a super advanced level.
Oh, yeah.
It's going to take some time to get there, but that's the goal.
Yeah, I don't know that you couldn't slow down every 10-year-old in America, and they're probably not going to be duplicating that exact shot. You know what I mean? But overall, not so bad. He's got some great studies here, or he's quoting some great studies. He's showing some exercise. Maybe we should be a little more specific. Like in this particular one, this would be an exercise where I would say, if you're only listening to this, these are the things that are going to become more difficult. If you get an 8 or a 10-year-old in the weight room and you want them to put a handle strap around their shoe to be able to do this exercise, it's going to be very difficult. Don't get me wrong. Muscle activation is going to be great. You can vary the weight. You don't have to change resistance bands levels. But if you put that thing around your foot and you've got a kid, most kids don't have great balance. So that's a difficult exercise without any stability factors like that wall drill. Stick your hands on the wall. Now we can kind of eliminate some of those things that a lot of young kids are not that great at.
Yeah, and I think obviously with Kbands, you're going to be able to do that at the park or at home. You can do that inside if you want. That's where they're more comfortable. So,
but the nuts and bolts of it, though, truly is the hip flexor. First exercise was a little bit more of our power in our glutes to get that back half separation. His second point is the importance of hip flexors for your speed training. And I'd say we're on the same page. Pretty good video he's got going. Let's see, deadlifts. Again, young kids and deadlifts, I don't know. We get into a lot of these advanced level movements and recommending these to young kids. And that's what we're trying to do here. We're trying to show little kids how you can duplicate these types of movements that are going to be a little bit more effective maybe for a young kid. But they've got a deadlift. I don't know that I would be doing extreme amounts of weights for a young kid under maybe 12, 13 years old. Deadlifts are not exactly that easy to perform properly.
Would you still suggest the barbell, or is there another way to make that effective without the big barbell, the balance?
Well, you can definitely use like a ballistic band type of a deal or like tube resistance bands. Imagine if you're in a single leg position, you stand on the band, you wrap your hands around, give them one loop, put it through your palms. Now we've got a good stable deal. The difference would be is you're not going to get the most amount of resistance in the most vulnerable position, right? So if you have your chest down low, the bands are going to lighten up, right? And then as you come up in a more of a powerful position, that's when you're going to get more resistance. But the tricky thing with resistance bands will be if you use less resistance, you'll be able to get more of a range of motion style exercise all the way to the top. If you get the resistance bands too heavy, when you get to the top, oftentimes they're going to be pulling you so hard that a lot of littler kids aren't going to be able to do that either. So stick to your lighter or medium level and then work for a little bit more pace through the exercise, because that's really what you're trying to do, get repetitions moving quick.
Well, hopefully too, if they become off balance, they have a chance to release. The bands are going to stop when you stop versus having a barbell there. And it's like, I got to lean over, or I'm moving my neck around. Our goal may be still to get to that point, but let's start with what is going to be most effective.
Yeah, so rather than your Romanian deadlifts or rather than your single leg exercises with a bar, you can easily stand on some resistance bands. Same rules apply. Nice flat back, bend over at the hip, because that's really what you're trying to train. Stretch the hamstring, work the glutes, and then as you explode up, keep the big chest and good posture, right? You're trying to stay tall and work as a hinge through the hip for sure. And then here he moves into a little bit of the sled stuff. Love sled training. But again, sleds are tough. If you don't have access to that kind of a thing, and if you're too young, that exercise is not going to be very applicable to, our younger kids. If you're 10, 12, 13 years old, sled pushes are too tough. I mean, they're going to be too heavy is what I mean.
I think you can modify that and maybe get a sled pull, or just, maybe, with the victory ropes, just wrap it around you, and then you've got an assister behind you.
Yeah, a lot of times, what are we doing when we're training young kids? We're with the team and we're not working by ourselves. So even utilizing partner action and utilizing each other as the resistance is a great way to duplicate your sled push. So wrap a band around your waist, Victory ropes, ballistic bands. If you got tube bands, all those will work. Put them around your waist, have an anchor move behind you, and as long as you're kind of taking that resistance forward, it's going to be a big help. And I tell you, the knees over toes guy has become such a big thing on the internet. I'm sure everybody's seen that. But your resisted anchors, I've been doing tons of this for the last probably 4-6 months. A lot of great stuff comes from that anchor, really resisting as the other guy runs forward. You're kind of double dipping. You've got one guy building some strength, stability in the knee, anchoring that guy down. And then, your young athlete in the front working on feet, hip flexors, driving through, all while holding the load in your spine. It's can be a good exercise. Do you do a lot of sled stuff with young guys, or are you using the resistance partner band setup?
I'm using the partner band stuff.
Yeah, a lot easier to go in the flow of practice for sure.
It's a little bit more effective. It's more fun. It's a little bit easier on them. I can switch things out back and forth.
Right.
So,
most sleds, what's a sled like this really weigh? That's a big kid. What's he, probably 15, 16, maybe 18?
He's probably pushing 18 years old. That's a heavy piece of equipment there, so there are just better ways to modify it. But I still think it's a great exercise. I still love somebody face planted there.
Yeah.
I think.
But it's good at training starts. When you do sled pushes, that angle, learning how to actually be explosive at that low 45 angle, it can be a great way to mimic that by pushing a sled that maybe you'll even get more results out of a sled than you will with bands around your waist, only because you can't truly get that really, really deep angle that you can get with the sled. So if you're more advanced, for sure, sleds all day long will probably be more effective. But if you're a little bit less advanced and still want to work on power off the ground, wrapping resistance bands around with some partner work is still going to be pretty darn effective.
For the really young kids, you could probably use yourself, you could be the sled, or have another athlete be the sled, because it doesn't have to be. You always have to remember that even 10%, 15% resistance is what you're looking for.
Well, a lot of times you see a lot of flaws in people's movements. As soon as you put some resistance on them, you find that every movement gets a little bit squirrely. You know what I mean? Hands start going crazy. You get a little slide in the knee. You see the weaknesses in someone's body. So a little bit of resistance can go a long way as long as everyone can keep their form. And I tell you, that's by far what you should be recommending to a young athlete every time you're training. As soon as resistance becomes a negative impact towards form, got to cut it back.
Let's cut it back.
Got to use less sets, less time duration. You could always start there, but for sure the weight is going to be a piece of that. And one other factor that you got to bring the weight down if someone can't maintain form or maintain explosiveness, right? When you're doing the speed training, a lot of times that slow motion thing comes in when kids aren't super motivated, and then you're just burning the candle at both ends, I guess, or you're not really getting anywhere,
And then I think you're getting sloppy.
Right.
So
let's see, Barbell Hip Thruster study. This is the one I was referencing earlier. He had 4 studies. The faster movements seem to be way more effective than overloading with too much weight. Whenever you had too much weight, they weren't showing a significant change in your running speed or the velocity of movement. But if you stayed a little bit quicker, more explosive, then more or less you were still getting some great results. But what do you think about that hip thruster? You've almost seen the fitness industry kind of as taken that exercise specifically by storm, right? It's, every woman in America is doing it. But ideally what you're trying to do is you're trying to focus on your glutes.
Right.
If you can become more explosive with your glutes, that's the 2 elements to the run, right? You're driving off your hips. You've got great glute activation that's going to excel you forward. Hip flexors come up to get you in the proper position to, again, repeat the process.
That's another area where I would like resistance, at least at the young level. You know how they tend to be. I got to do more weight. I got to get the bigger plates on there. Now we're overloading them and we're not getting the results we thought we were.
Well, that's an exercise too. Let me back it up just a little bit so we can see it on camera. But that's an exercise too that when you work with young athletes, a lot of times what you'll see is you'll never actually get a flat back. You'll always have kind of a sag in your hips. So if you're a dad and you're training your kid, if you're doing any kind of a hip thrust or drill, you want to make sure that the body is in a perfectly flat line. And you don't have to use a bench. You can use a stability ball to take it to another level of balance. But if you can't drive up and close the chain all the way through, drive the butt up, run a straight line from your shoulder to your knee, that's really where you need to be. But there's a lot of times where you'll leave your hips chambered back, right? It's a little easier on your hamstring. So if you're a hip thruster, you got to make sure you thrust them. You know what I mean? You got to get them up. And then weight, don't be too, overzealous with the weight. You can't get too heavy to where you can't still be explosive. That's going to be a big part of it. Grab that weight, drive it up each and every set. Don't be lazy with bringing your hips up. Now, the next part here is the manual resisted hamstring curls. And let's pause it here so, the viewers can see. This is a pretty advanced level exercise that not a lot of kids are going to be able to do without some assistance, right?
I think that, at this level, he can do this. But, you get a youth athlete, their hamstrings haven't developed that much. And I don't want them trying to do that and they're going to fall or they're going to.
Well, this rack mechanism is really cool, too. That's a rogue rack that isn't exactly designed only for manual resisted hamstring curls. But that rack makes it pretty easy. You slide your feet right under because that's half the battle is how do you get your legs situated in a way that when you put your lever out over, how are you going to come back? A lot of times if you're working on the field and you've got a lot of kids around, you can partner up, get behind them, put their legs between your legs, and then you can just give them some resistance or lay on their feet or their ankles. I never really liked the ankle deal. I always felt like, man, I would get like cramps in my feet. You know what I mean?
I would rather you be a little bit farther up, maybe to the
sit right in the arch of their feet or on the ball of their feet. And if you find that they're a little tippy still, you have to have a sturdy thing to pivot on. So make sure that you kind of find that sweet spot. If you're just driving down on their ankle, their feet are going to hurt. And if you're pushing down on their heels, their ankles are going to hurt. So mess around with that, communicate with one another, give each other tips on like, ooh, I don't like that. I don't like that.
They may be thinking, oh boy, I'm going to face plant too, because they're going to start to feel that my hamstrings aren't that strong. Maybe you just get a little tug on the shirt or the jersey.
Yeah,
just give them a little bit of help.
You make a good point. So there's a couple modifications you can do with manual resisted hamstring curls, especially with a partner, because you're not going to be stuck to the wall like in this exercise. So here they're utilizing this rack, so they can't do it anywhere else. But if you go in between a squat rack and you've got a partner, or say you're at a soccer field, how many sports are practices on a soccer field? There's a whole lot of, that's where you end up, right?
Right.
Well, you can utilize the goal, right? You've got the soccer goal, and if you put some resistance bands up tall, your athletes can come up. You've got one guy that'll hold down their ankles. So imagine you're facing the goalpost. So you've got the goalpost and all the athletes are in between. Well, if the athletes will grab some bands around their neck and hold them here at their chest, what you can do is if they're really, really light bands, then you can actually do this hamstring curl, and at the hardest point when they're fully down, if you can get them to maintain proper form and use the resistance band, what you'll find is that resistance band will help them out at that hardest point, and you can mimic this exact exercise with a ton of assistance for little kids, because the manual resisted hamstring curls are by far, probably right now in 2022, touted as one of the best hamstring exercises you can do to prevent injuries. So working on the deceleration down and then not getting stuck, right? Using the band to get yourself back out of the hole can be an effective tool until these kids are a little stronger.
I think if you're going out to the park, just use your imagination a little bit. You can find a good anchor somewhere and just modify it.
Yeah, the trouble with someone helping with a t-shirt or something is you have to apply the resistance down on their legs so that they can get back up. So if you've got partners of 3, you could maybe mimic something like that, put a band across their chest, and then the third guy can kind of pull upwards at a high 45 at a bit of an angle, would kind of give you that same feeling. So you've got your anchor down low, you've got your active exercising athlete, and then you could put a ballistic band or something across their chest, hold your hand out, just give them just a slight pull at the very bottom with that resistance band. You're going to be able to mimic that goalpost assistance as well. And this is great for any kids that are are just too young to do this exercise. You put anybody on this exercise 13 and younger that have never done it before, I guarantee you they need help.
Well, and you want them to be comfortable. You don't want them to think, I am going to face plant here.
Right, and there's catch methods, right? So another version of assistance that kind of the first wave of this was you resist at the hip, get down as far as you can, maintaining that proper form, and then as soon as your hamstrings kind of give out, then you'll just catch yourself. So you'll come down in a push-up position, and then you'll give a little bit of a push out to get out of that hardest point, and then pull up from there. But if you truly wanted the full range of the resistance, those resistance bands methods are pretty effective.
Oh, absolutely.
And here is a shot of the exercise where he's really showing you how you do that catch. You take it down as far as you can. He's got his hips forward, and then he drops down to the catch, and then you just push yourself back up, and you kind of flirt with that little position, right, as soon as you can catch. So if you can push enough to catch the resistance right where you're able to pull up, that's ideally the right spot. You don't want to just throw your body weight all the way up.
And I think after you've done a few of those, you'll get a good feel for it to where now I know better when I want to do that little push off.
Absolutely. Now check this out. This is his modification. I haven't seen this before, and this is pretty smart. Take you out a stability ball out front, and that's pretty smart. That's a really good modification. So what we were looking at for just you listeners out there is he's got a stability ball that he sets out in front of him, and similar to an ab exercise where you would do a chopper, I like to call them. You slide your hands out and you'll activate your core. Well, it's kind of almost a combo move here. Standard manual resistant coming down, and he's taking a lot of that load off on that stability ball. That's a pretty clever modification.
I really like that.
Yeah.
And plus you get the core activation and your balance.
Yeah, but I would think that one thing you'd need to tell younger kids is, remember, we're doing hamstrings. So don't just use your arms.
Right.
You know?
Don't just use your arms. Don't lean out there. The accentuation has to be on the hamstrings.
Right. Because, most of the time, you got a 10 or 11-year-old kid, they're going to do movements not specific to muscle groups, right? The overall goal is, you want me to do what? Okay, I'm going to get that job done. And as you get a little bit older, it seems as though you're able to focus directly on the muscle groups. I mean, I remember the first time I ever did manual resistance hamstring curls, they were in high school. And I can remember how drastically different they were from high school to college, because at college, that mind-body connection gets a lot better. I know that I'm trying to work my hamstrings, so I keep them insanely engaged on the way down, really engaged on the way up. It's a hamstring exercise. When I'm younger, this is way too much weight on my body, and my hips drop back because I try to take the load out before I blow a hamstring, right? And then I'm catching as fast as I can. And then you're throwing, you know what I mean, though? Like, a lot of times that younger bracket of athletes, don't let them go through the motion, getting your exercise done and not actually focusing on the muscle groups. You know what I mean?
Oh, well, there's a lot of them don't understand it. We all have a tendency not to work the hamstrings. And when a kid does that, if you're working quads, I'm like, oh, I feel that, man. I'm getting stronger.
Right.
And then I feel my hamstring going, ooh, wait a minute. I can tell that's not going to feel good.
Yeah, hamstrings are kind of like the rotator cuff exercises. You're like, this is terrible. You know what I mean? This
Exactly.
burns so much. I must be doing something wrong. And I feel that way about manual resisted hamstring curl all day long. It is if you keep your hips forward and you drop into that, the amount of tension in your hamstrings it's above average.
It is. And if you've ever pulled your hamstring, your brain keeps waiting for that to happen. So you got to be careful. And you got to explain to these kids, this is what we're trying to do. You can't run without your hamstrings. So they're important.
Very important to not get them injured. I mean, I think people need, younger kids especially, they need to practice the movement a lot. Some assistance may actually be the most beneficial. And if you don't have the ability to use resistance bands and the tips that I gave a little bit earlier, I tell you what, that modification right here from this guy is pretty great. I like that a lot.
That may be my favorite one of this whole group.
Yeah, though it's really smart. The trouble would be is, can you get kids to get out of their arms? This exercise is not for loading your upper body. Keep it in your hamstrings. As soon as you get done, let it get to your hamstrings again.
When you're pushing off, you're releasing.
Right.
Now you're not. So now you're going to have that tendency to stay in that
Right.
arm motion. And
But overall, so we've got several exercises he suggested, and this is not exactly like the most upper level exercises that there is, but it goes to show you that training for explosive movements, even at a younger age, is what you really need to be doing. Training glutes, training hip flexors, training explosiveness, and then the hamstrings on the other side of the chain. You've got to be able to strengthen hamstrings so that you don't get injured.
Exactly.
Most of the upper level sprinters, that's normally what they're, you got NFL guys changing direction, ACL injuries, right? If you get linear speed, not a lot of times are you going to be having torn up knees because there's not a lot of change of direction. But what do you have a ton of? Hamstring issues. When you get in that upper level echelon of glutes super activating, pushing you off the ground, hamstring injuries all day long. So flexibility and strength in these manual resisted style exercises are going to be huge for these younger kids. How often do you think, what do you suggest if you're working with kids 10 and under should be doing strength training, rehabilitation style exercises like this outside of, like, say, general soccer practice, general baseball practice?
I would probably try to do it maybe 2 times a week.
Yeah,
I think when you start going more, it becomes a little bit too much. Let's work our way into this. As you get a little bit older, it's fine to do more, but more is not always better.
Yeah, we've seen it time and time again. As soon as you get youth athletes, young athletes, they're reading these workout regimens from professional athletes. They're reading these workout regimens from, great strength coaches. And it's a lot. It's too much for a 10, 12-year-old that can see massive newbie gains. And what I mean by that is when you first start, just getting fundamental movements in, learning how to do them properly, and then training in a little bit of a 1 to 2 day consistency type of thing throughout the week. No burnout, not getting them turned off. Let them play with their friends. Let them still get athletic in all the different ways that they're doing. But, 2 days a week is a big improvement for that demographic of an athlete.
Absolutely. And, when I train, I like to make sure that I tell them, right, now we're going to go out and we're going to do some sport-specific work. I want you to understand why we went through that the other day. This is how it's going to help you.
So you like to relate not only the exercise itself, but then bring it back to like live, can you give me an example? Like, say if you were doing manual resisted hamstring curls, or you're just running sprints and you're saying, hey, this is where this comes into play. Is that what you mean?
Kind of, but as you're going through some sport-specific skills, I want you to stop. Let's say, now, do you feel your hamstring? You're using it right there. That's why we did that. That's how you're going to improve. You're going to be faster, stronger, and more athletic.
Right.
And they understand it better. It's sort of like math class. Why am I using this? What am I going to do with algebra?
Sure. And I think one of the big exercises that you can see a lot of people doing wrong is those hip flexor style exercises. Anytime that you bend over, you hunch at the waist. I feel like as soon as you take off resistance or you get done doing those exercises that he suggested, it's easy to do. And then you get out to the field, you're not doing that kind of stuff. So when you're training your young kid 1 to 2 times a week, do some of these types of exercises, modify them if you're not quite as advanced as what they recommend. And then make sure that when you take all the resistance off, when you get out of the weight room, you're still applying those same type of movements, right? You could see it big time in the hip flexor movements where we got chest very erect. We've got good posture up top. Then when you bring your knee up, huge separation. Well, if the kid comes out and then doesn't drive his knees when he runs, kind of defeats the whole purpose.
It does. I mean, you got exercise and workout form, and you've got athletic form when you're out on the field.
Yeah, so utilize these type of exercises to train the fundamental form that you're going to use to be explosive.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.